First of all, thank you all for coming to our presentation. In case you don't know, we are the Pasadena group of the Sierra Club. And you can find out more about us by going to our website at www.sierraclub.org/Angeles/Pasadena. And you can find all our hikes there and other information. We're all about hikes, and we will be describing several hikes that are coming up later. But the Sierra Club is also about changing the world for the better, especially with respect to the environment and conservation. And if you join us, you can get into that effort as well. If you want to join, it's cheap, and you can do it online at the back of this room, actually. And Eric back there can show you how to do it online. I'm the Sierra Club's representative to the Pasadena 100, a coalition of 20 nonprofit and nonpartisan organizations in Pasadena who want to convince Pasadena Water and Power that it should be powered by carbon-free electricity by 2030, and so that's a stretch. They don't want to do that. Currently, half of Pasadena's power is made from fossil fuels, from coal and natural gas. Pasadena 100 has been collecting postcards telling the power company to go carbon-free by 2030 from PWP customers over the summer, and it now has over 1,100 signed cards, which they're going to present to the Pasadena City Council in a rally on the City Hall steps on October 24th. So if you're a Pasadena resident especially, and if you'd like to participate, go to the Pasadena 100 website, which is Pasadena100, one word, .org, and find out how to participate in that rally. They're looking to get as many people as possible out there in front of City Hall so that the City Council can see that this is an issue for the city. Now for the feature of the evening, Iceland and Svalbard, an Arctic journey. The presenter, Carol Skurlock, is a traveler, photographer, Sierra Club leader, editor of the Arroyo View, the online newsletter of the Pasadena Group, and of course a member of the Pasadena Group. She will present photographs of her recent trip to the near Arctic Circle. Please join me in welcoming Carol.
That helps. Well, thank you for inviting me to share my photos and my experience on this Arctic trip. If you saw the video before we started the meeting, that was all about Svalbard, so you have a preview of that. But I'm going to show you Iceland, which was the pre-trip before Svalbard, and we only toured the south. We only had 5 days, so this is a pretty brief. I'm going to go through these pretty fast. Iceland is it's a very unique volcanic island because it's young geographically. It's constantly being transformed by volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and glacier melt. As you know, glaciers are melting all over the world, and Iceland's glaciers have lost 7% of their surface since year 2000. I can show you a dramatic example of that coming up in the slides. But first, we had to have this spa experience at this popular hot spring, mostly for tourists. This is only one of 600 geothermal pools in the active volcanic area of Iceland. Geothermal power plants produce 29% of the country's total electricity production. Then we visited this Thingvellir National Park that sits on the Atlantic Rift between two tectonic plates, the Eurasian and North American, which are drifting apart. So Iceland is literally being torn apart, causing constant seismic activity. The rift is creating valleys, cliffs, and the fault lines you can see in the foreground. I got a little carried away with photographing waterfalls. I left I lost track of my group, and about this time the bus left without me, but they came back and picked me up. But I learned my lesson. You have to stay with the group. This was not a photo trip. I did not have endless time to photograph things. This is it's like the Old Faithful of Iceland, a huge geothermal area with one active geyser that shot up every 4 minutes. The area is comparable to Yellowstone National Park, with geysers, fumaroles, and sulfur pods. And this colossal waterfall flows in 2 tiers down into a 100-foot deep crevice. Yeah, interesting fact. Iceland gets 73% of its renewable energy from hydropower resources powered by glacial rivers. So accelerated glacial melt from global warming is a big problem for Iceland. This is a fall. The name I'm not going to try to pronounce, but it's very, very popular in Iceland. It's a must-see that is fed by a melting water from an ice cap above. A cavern behind the falls allows you to walk around the back side. Then there's a steep rock scramble getting out. After traveling about an hour in an all-terrain bus over rocks and streams, we hiked into this canyon where we got our first view of Oak, I call it Oak Glacier. I wondered what I was supposed to be looking at. It didn't look like a glacier. Our leader said it was the tongue of a glacier that had receded. Here's a close-up of the surface, blackened by volcanic ash. And here's the glacier in 2010, after a volcanic eruption created a lagoon in front of it. 4 years later, in 2014, the glacier had retreated to such an extent that it could no longer be classified as a true glacier, a first for Iceland. And in 2019, Icelanders held a funeral for Oak, dead at the age of 700 years, 7 centuries. This memorial plaque was installed on a nearby hill. I encourage you to read it, A Letter to the Future. It's very moving, I think. At the bottom, they wrote the parts per million of carbon dioxide in 2019. I don't know what it is now. Does anybody know? This so-called Diamond Beach was a destination I wanted to go to because I'd seen so many photos of it, where these translucent chunks of ice wash up on the black volcanic beach. There were so many people that I did a 180 and got this view looking toward the mountains. You can see how far up the beach the high tides have carried the ice. We took a boat cruise around this beautiful ice formations on the deepest lake in Iceland, 814 feet. This is probably frozen over by now in October. And the black is the volcanic ash that kind of brings out the contours in the ice. these are the basalt rock formations that rise from the beach on the south coast of Iceland. You can see the same kind of formations at Devil's Post Pile in Mammoth, if you've been there. They're also on the coast of Ireland on the Giant's Causeway. And this is a ceiling of the basalt cavern that eroded by the ocean's high tides over the years. So any questions on Iceland? Yeah.
Because global warming, the glacier is melting, and you said that was a problem for the people of Iceland, and I was wondering why they're relying on electric, hydropower, why that would be a problem.
Well, they have a pretty cheap electricity right now, and there are companies that come to Iceland to do business for manufacturing because the electricity is cheap. So that's a revenue that would be lost, and they also have to endure a very long winter, total darkness, 3 to 4 months. So they need electricity. You know, Iceland used to be a very impoverished country. It was dependent on all energy from Europe, and they used to import coal. And so they don't want to give up this, their modern lifestyle. Oh, sorry. Trying to get this back. Ooh. Wait. Go back. Okay, leave that alone. Well, why did I go to Svalbard? I wanted to see the Arctic, and Svalbard was as close as I was going to get to having an Arctic experience. It was remote but accessible. Some people asked me, or they told me that there was nothing to see there. Well, I have to show you that there is a lot to see there. Spectacular scenery and diverse wildlife. Svalbard is this group of islands in a small circle just inside the Arctic Ocean, the Arctic Circle. Norway is at bottom right. You can see Iceland below Greenland. So we flew from Oslo to Longyearbyen, and then we landed our first and only dry landing in Nilesen. So here's our route, which included excursion way up into the Arctic Ocean. Here is our landing in Nilesen. You can see our small ship. Nilesen is an international research community and the highest community on Earth at 79 degrees latitude. Besides being a center for natural science research and environmental monitoring, the research station studies climate change. And as you may know, the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the globe, and the Svalbard region is warming the fastest within the Arctic. In the first week of September, the recorded temperature at this latitude, at 79 latitude, was 37 degrees, which was unprecedented for this time of year. 35 people stay here through the polar winter, and 180 are here during the summer. Think this is the housing for the researchers. Originally a mining town, Nielsen also served as a starting point for explorer Raoul Amundsen's expedition by airship to the North Pole in 1926. This was the first successful flight across the North Pole, although the airship crashed on the return and Amundsen disappeared during the 1928 rescue mission to recover it. Next, we had a wet landing in this fjord, to see the 14th of July Glacier, which is actually Bastille Day in France. But not before our leaders scouted the area. The Sky Blue Glacier rises 30 feet above sea level, and we witnessed a lot of calving of the glacier while we were there. We heard a boom, then seconds later what sounded like a gunshot, then an explosion of ice flying out of the glacier face and crashing in the water. As our Zodiac left the shore, 3 small waves headed for the beach, driving everyone up the shore. This was our group, several groups waiting to leave. At 9:30 at night, the same night, we were called to come up to the top deck to see this beautiful glacier bay lit by low light of evening. This was the first day that the sun went below the horizon at 12:30 a.m., but only for 1 hour. Sunrise was at 1:31 a.m., which I never witnessed. I wasn't up that late. By the time we left Longyearbyen at the end of our trip, the days had shortened to 19.5 hours of daylight. By October 27th, the sun will be down all day with a long twilight. The long polar winter lasts until February 16th, when the sun rises at 11:22 a.m., then sets at 1:02 p.m. This is a big day of celebration for those who live year-round on Spitsbergen and experience 4 months of darkness. We crossed into a fjord system on the west coast of the foot of these towering mountains. This region served as a base for whale hunting in the 17th century. At a landing site on Gravenset, we saw remains of blubber pots used to render whale blubber into oil and the graves of early whalers. Oil from whale blubber was an important commodity for several centuries, used in oil lamps and soap. Later, it was used to lubricate machinery in the Industrial Revolution until petroleum products replaced it. So you could say petroleum saved the whales from extinction. But ironically, Norway still allows hunting of minke whales for use as animal and human food in Norway and for export to Japan. We also stopped at this beautiful glacier at the end of the fjord, and I shot straight into the Arctic sun that's low all day long. Doesn't get much higher than this. And we cruised into this fjord, I think it's pronounced Smerenberg, and landed our Zodiacs on the shore of another Dutch whaling station active in the 1600s. It's one of our lookouts, making sure there's no polar bears in the area. We saw remnants of scattered timbers from excavated buildings. And we were lucky to see a haul out of walruses on shore, but had to keep our distance behind a safety line. Before we returned to the ship, we cruised by some basking harbor seal. This guy looks like he's in a very awkward position, but actually it's very comfortable on all that fat. After cruising north across the Arctic Ocean overnight, we finally reached the zone of pack ice. The first ice we saw in the morning was thin and scant, then became thicker like this pancake ice that covered the sea as far as the eye could see. The ship finally turned around when we reached 82 degrees latitude, and we're 547 miles from the North Pole, about the same distance from LA to San Francisco. And how do we celebrate 82 degrees latitude? With a polar plunge. This icy water was pumped in directly from the ocean. Our air temperature was 33, and you can imagine how cold the water was. These were some of our leaders who took the plunge. The onlookers in parkas were served champagne while they cheered on the divers. And the next day, we were on an excursion at the foot of these basalt cliffs where nesting pairs of Brunix guillemots return every year. We were lucky to see thousands of them before they migrated. And all ledges were occupied with parents and fledglings. The fledglings were taking their first flights into the ocean with their fathers, who was teaching them how to dive for fish. It was very noisy and very smelly here. Actually, it kind of looked like penguins, don't they? In the lower right, you can see a little family. There's several pairs out there. Then we were off to find another location to explore. Ice never kept us from getting to shore, but there was another danger: polar bears. If our scout saw any polar bears, even a white speck in the distance, we could not land our Zodiacs. So this was plan B: float the Zodiacs near shore where we could photograph a mother and bear and her cub. I think we had all our Zodiacs out there, about a dozen of them. They were eating the remains of a whale carcass. Because of the loss of sea ice around Spitsbergen in the summer, the bears are foraging on land for food instead of hunting seals. So they become scavengers instead of hunters. And in this video, you can notice that the mother bear is wearing a tracking collar. Scientists are tracking her movements on land to find out where she's going for food. You can see it right there, a big heavy collar. Really a cute video. Well, she was very wary of us. She wasn't disturbed, but she was keeping an eye on us all the time. The next day, we turned in this fjord that's a polar desert area on the southwestern coast of the Northeast land. What looks like sand are fine pebbles. We got to see another big walrus hole out. I mean, just they're laying all over the place. They're on top of each other. You would think that they would be easy prey for polar bears during the summer months. They're so slow moving and easily trapped, but polar bears, they can't get a hold of them due to their thick layer of fat. We cruised past this 100-mile-long glacier that's surging from the biggest ice cap in Svalbard. I'm going to go back. You can see the waterfall between the two eyebrows, those two arches in the ice. Our captain made 2 passes by this glacier. Small floating icebergs show the results of calving. And there's beautiful lenticular clouds formed over the glacier as if it created its own weather pattern. The next day, we found ourselves in Belsen, a large sound framed by rugged mountains and glaciers. We went ashore at this place called Minterhuken, an exposed green area of land splitting the main fjords of Belsen. Ocean currents gave this area a warmer climate, enabling delicate Arctic plants to grow like this. This is so-called moss tundra. Fertilized by seabirds and geese droppings, you can see at the right, there's hard to take a picture without geese droppings. The tundra was soft and spongy to walk on, and I worried that future tourism was going to trample it. And these rock formations are quite different than any place else that I saw in Svalbard. The bones, I was told, were from a polar bear. The forearm and the spine. We took a wet landing at this, an old deserted Camp Myler, one time gold mining base. The hills near shore were formed from mining excavations. The area is now home to seabirds and iconic wildlife like the Arctic fox. Just little foxes getting a winter coat, the white patches. It's going to be all white pretty soon. We took our Zodiacs into this, closer to this glacier. It would be the last one we would see up close. So our trip was coming to an end in Longyearbyen. The morning snowfall had just dusted the mountains. And we took a bus ride to the Global Seed Vault. It's that triangular building built into the mountain. The vault offers free and long-term storage of seed duplicates from all gene banks and nations as part of a global effort to secure the diversity of seeds for future generations. The vault is artificially cooled to minus 0.4 Fahrenheit. And here's tribute to our leaders, our 7 leaders, all from Argentina. They also led trips to Antarctica, so they are polar experts. These are our expedition leaders. They kept us organized and safe getting on and off the Zodiacs, and gave presentations every evening on their field of expertise. So we learned a lot about wildlife, glaciers, and all that. So Overseas Adventure was our travel company, and Grand Circle Cruise Line provided the small ships. Well, thank you. It's my first time trying to talk about, I had to read my notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.